Hey guys, welcome to another video here on the AviationPro channel. Now FS2020 is about to be released and I thought I'd make a little video about the things that you need to know before buying the sim and before engaging in this flight sim hobby. And that's because the world of flight simulation is quite a complex one and this entire hobby altogether. So keeping the following things in mind will definitely come in handy. Now if you're already an experienced flight sim user, this video might not be for you, but otherwise it will be fun to watch anyways. This video has been brought to you by RDPresets. Over at RDPresets.com you can find a bunch of information on how to run your simulator as smooth as possible and make it look as good as possible depending on your system. They got various guides for Prepared and Explain, and they are also working on a guide for FS2020. So FS2020 will also be supported in their catalog, and they're actually working on a new scenery, for Rotterdam Airport in the Netherlands, which is going to be released and made compatible for Explain, Prepared and FS2020. So if you're looking for some good information based on real-world experience on how to run your simulator the best way possible and also how to run FS2020 the best way possible, make sure you visit them over at rdpresets.com. Now the thing about flight simulation is that you can really make it as complex as you want. You can go from flying through barns and buildings, as this video from FS2020 kind of suggests, all the way from simulating a flight from A to B very realistically with air traffic control from, for example, the VATSIM network. So depending on what you want to do, if you regard flight sim more as a game or flight sim as an actual simulator, different kinds of people will step in, different kinds of people will probably use the new FS2020. So keeping the things that we're going to discuss in this video in mind will definitely help you to kind of, take your bearings as to where you want to go with the sim and how this entire flight sim space works. Now the first very important thing to know about flight simulation is the add-ons. Flight sim is all about add-ons. And when you buy a flight simulator, you buy a base package that you can add things to, like airplanes, scenery, airports. Now every single simulator usually recreates the world in some way. Usually all airports are included, and then they have highlighted a few airports that are custom made so they look better and more genuine to the real airport. And usually the simulators also come with a couple of aircraft. The same for FS2020, as you have seen in the development posts and videos. They include all airports in the world, but they are all auto-generated, but they have highlighted a few airports and made them by hand, and also they've included a couple of aircraft which are very interesting, and depending on which premium version of FS2020 you buy, you get a certain base package that you can work with. Now the thing is, with flight simulation it's never really complete, depending on how complex you want to make it for yourself. If you use flight sim as a game, if you just want to fly around, if you just want to fly in multiplayer with a couple of friends and just mess about a little bit, or if you want to do some bush flying and don't really care about what airport you fly to, then you probably will be alright with the base sim as you buy it. But if you're very serious about this hobby, you might want to expand it. You want to expand it with airplanes that have been realistically simulated. For example, a company like PMDG recreates very realistic Boeing aircraft that are system-wise very close to the actual real airplane. And the same for airports. Yes, FS2020 will include some more handmade airports that look more genuine, and then all the other airports are probably just auto-generated. But for example, you may want to fly to Lisbon and it turns out they not have included Lisbon maybe, and then you need another add-on for that in order to get an accurate representation of Lisbon. So that's the kind of the way it works. And if we look back at the aircraft, it's very important to realize that likely that the default aircraft that come with FS2020 are not as realistic as you may expect. Now, from what it looks like from the videos, actually they've done a really good job already. If you look at the Airbus, for example, some of the systems that you see in the video look pretty genuine, but whether it's really an accurate representation of the aircraft in terms of system depth, system simulation, failure simulation, kind of the things that you can expect, for example, with the FS Labs Airbus aircraft, which is an add-on, probably is not going to be of the same level of depth. So if you're very serious about this hobby, if you really want to fly the Airbus and really want to understand all the systems like the real airplane, probably this Airbus that comes with FS20 20 will not suffice. So please keep in mind that even though they say yes, the Boeing 787 is going to be included in one of the premium package, yes, the Airbus is going to be included, it's likely not going to be of the same level as you would get it from a developer like PMDG, FS Labs, and there are many others out there. So there's a whole world to discover in regards to add-ons, aircraft, scenery, and airports. And also utilities, you know, with Prepared and Explain, we always had a lot of utilities like a weather engine, you know, a GSX in order for pushback, and ground services on the ground. And those were not included in the main sim. So it remains to be seen what is included in FS2020, to what degree we need kind of the utility add-ons like a weather engine, and yeah, then we'll see. But just be aware that there's a huge add-on market out there. And developers have already said that they're going to develop stuff for FS2020 as well. And just be aware that, you know, you can expand your flight simulator hugely. Just don't think that everything will come in one single package. That's probably not true. Even though they list a bunch of airports and a bunch of airplanes, you're probably still going to need to expand your flight sim if you're very serious about this hobby. And if you're not, you're probably fine. Now, the second thing that you need to know about flight simulation is the multiplayer side of things. Now, as you've seen from FS2020, they've announced a partnership with VATSIM. VATSIM is a network where you can actually fly together with other pilots and where also people are who act as air traffic controllers. And VATSIM is a great network. It's great fun. There are many videos about that on this channel. Basically, they really use the real-world procedures to the best of their ability, and air traffic controllers actually have to receive training first before they are allowed to control on the network. And yeah, just the whole atmosphere around flying on VATSIM is just very realistic. So if you, for example, have a good add-on airplane that's very realistic, and then if you fly on VATSIM with all the real-world procedures and ATC procedures, then you can really get a very good sense of what it's like to, you know, fly a flight. But keep in mind that FS2020 will likely come with also a regular multiplayer function, so you can just fly around and mess about with other people without really taking it very serious. You know, a network like VATSIM is very serious. Another network that's out there is Ivao or Pilot Edge. Those are really networks where you are going for realism. Just be aware that those networks exist. So again, depending on how complex you want to make it for yourself, you can go from messing about with friends in a multiplayer session all the way to simulating a flight very realistically on a network like VATSIM. Now, the third thing to know about the world of flight simulation is, of course, the hardware. Flight simulation is all about hardware, and again, you can make it as crazy as you want. You can go from flying with your mouse or your keyboard all the way to, you know, actually building a home cockpit that looks very realistic. So there's just so many things that you can do here. What I would recommend if you're starting out with this hobby, go for a joystick at least. That's very, very essential. Flying with a keyboard or mouse doesn't really give you a very proper sense of flight. Taking off a landing is pretty much impossible. Just kind of try to get a cheap joystick like this one, the Logitech Extreme 3D Pro. It's a very easy joystick. It has some configurable buttons. You can you know, move all axes and the throttle axis, and you can just, you know, fly around that way. Then maybe later you can advance it a little bit more. There are a lot of products out there on the market. Again, this is a very big hobby, so there's plenty of choice, but you can expand, for example, with a yoke, and then with some throttle sets and also a rudder pedal set. Doing this will really give you a very good sense of what it's like to fly an airplane with yoke, rudder, you know, it's the stick and rudder feeling, basically, that you're controlling the aircraft using your hands and using your feet as you would do in real life. So just be aware again that, you know, like the existence of a huge add-on market, which will likely, you know, start to develop as FS2020 releases, there's also a huge hardware market out there. You can buy it from stores, many stores, you know, to buy joysticks, yokes, and other cockpit panels, whatever. Just be aware that those are out there. Do make sure that it's compatible with FS2020. You might want to hold off before you buy all kinds of things, just to make sure that it's compatible with FS2020. And another small little tip that I would suggest, there are many people who are also leaving this hobby, so you might also want to look up on, secondhand places like eBay or whatever, people who've already used Flightsim products. You can save a little money by looking there, just to get a simple joystick, for example. Now, the fourth thing to consider that's related to hardware is, of course, your PC. It's well known that flight simulators are very, very heavy on performance. No matter if you're using X-Plane, Prepared, and also likely FS2020, you're going to need a beefy system. If you've looked at the specifications required for FS2020, you can see that the recommended specs in order to run the sim very well are quite high end. So that's the thing with flight simulation. It's very much a trade-off between quality and frames. The thing is, of course, you want to make sure that your sim looks nice, but you also want to be able to fly properly. Landing and taking off in a low frame rate condition is really not pleasant. Just like any other game, any shooter, if you have low frame rates, it's very hard to actually control what you're doing. And the same for flight simulation, but that's an extra notch further. Especially if you're going to expand your flight simulator with add-ons, it's going to be very heavy on performance. Those add-ons are very heavy. They require a lot of calculation in order to calculate all the background processes and to display it on your screen. And then you have a weather engine which has to render the weather. Maybe it's raining, maybe it's cloudy outside. Maybe you're flying into a very complex region like London Heathrow. This really is degrading the performance. And this is just a word of warning. Just because FS2020 is a new simulator doesn't mean it will magically run a lot smoother than our current simulators like X-Plane or Prepared. If you look at the videos that they've released before carefully, you can actually see some scenes with a lot of clouds and a complex aircraft like the Airbus, where the frame rates are pretty low. And I don't think we should believe that magically everything is going to be better. You're going to have to play around with the settings inside FS2020 in order to trade off quality for performance. So it's a thing to keep in mind. Now, in terms of building or getting a PC, I would suggest to build it yourself if you want to save some money. I've actually done that just now. I've built a new system in order to be able to run FS2020 hopefully quite well, and of course in order to be able to make some videos in it. You can see some of my specs here and can kind of see what it looks like. Now again, by building it yourself, you can carefully look at what parts you want to pick, and maybe you can also get some second-hand items to put in your new PC. And in that way you can save some money. It depends on how complex you want to go with this hobby. If you just want to fly around and don't want to fly in complex regions, you're probably not going to need a very huge PC. But if you're going to go very serious with this hobby, if you really want to simulate airliner flights into busy airspaces like London and Amsterdam, those are very heavy scenery areas usually. No matter what sim you use and no matter what add-ons you've installed, it's going to degrade the performance quite a bit. So just keep in mind that you are going to have to need quite a beefy PC. And all in all, it just makes this hobby expensive. It's really a downside of this hobby. Of course, this depends on how far you go, if you buy a lot of add-ons and a lot of hardware. But in any case, it's going to be quite an expensive hobby if you like it. But it's a great hobby. It's great fun. You learn a lot about aviation. And especially if you want to start your pilot career, it's a great way to actually experience aviation beforehand. I can tell you from personal experience. Now, one more point tying in with hardware, but also the software side, is technical frustration. Somehow simulators never really work the way you expect it, especially because it's so complex. Again, if you're just running the sim without any add-ons, you're probably going to be fine, although you probably have to play around with the settings in order to get the best performance. But as soon as you introduce add-ons and make the whole flight sim more complex, you're gonna have to deal with technical frustrations. Now, especially with the release of an entirely new sim, and if companies are going to release add-ons, it's going to build up onto each other. Some add-ons are going to have hiccups, and then when you install a lot of stuff, your sim might crash and you don't know what caused it. It can be a lot of frustration. Flightsim is not perfect, and I don't expect personally FS2020 to be perfect either. I would definitely suggest, if you not want to go into the trouble, just take some time, maybe some months, in order to let the dust settle, to kind of see how the the sim performs for other people, and how add-ons perform as they are going to be released in the upcoming months after the release. And again, this is just a nasty side effect of the flight sim. I've had flights where my sim crashed on short final, or I configured some sort of button wrong where my flight sim would reset. It can be very, very frustrating. So the more complex you make it, the more likely your sim will crash or something will happen. That's just part of the hobby. Part of the hobby is just dealing with this and just trying to find out stuff and solve the issues as you encounter them. Now, the sixth thing to keep in mind is all about learning. Again, of course, it depends on how complex you want to make it, but if you're very serious about this hobby, it's going to take time to learn about how to fly an airplane in the first place, how the systems inside an airplane work. You can start with a simple general aviation aircraft and just kind of take a look how it flies. You start to discover the airplane characteristics, but then you also want to look into the systems. How do the radios work? How does the GPS work? How does this and this needle work? And then as you move into the airliners, you're going to face a whole entire new world of system complexity, especially if you're going to install complex add-ons. Then you will discover, okay, how do all these knobs and switches on the overhead panel work? How does the fuel, the hydraulics, and the fire system work? How does the flight management system work? How do I actually set up a flight using this airliner, and how do I actually fly it? It takes a lot of time. Now, I'm sure many of you are new to this hobby and are trying to figure out how this all works. But I would suggest just take your time. It took me years to get to a level where I would feel comfortable. I started my flights with the FS2004, taking a flying lesson from Rod Machado, and a couple of years later I was kind of comfortable making videos about flying a flight on VATSIM. And even then it was not perfect, and even now it's still not perfect. There's still things that you learn every single day, every single flight that you make with Flightsim, and especially if you don't fly that often, you're kind of, start to forget things, and then you think, all right, I made this mistake on my previous flight, I will correct it on the next flight. So the basic point that I want to make here is that you cannot really just jump into this hobby and expect to fly airplanes automatically and configure all the systems automatically. It takes time, it takes attention, it takes a lot of reading, it takes a lot of watching videos in order to learn how to actually do things in the flight simulator. And if that's not for you, that's perfectly fine. You can probably just fire up an airplane in the sky and just fly around, maybe fly some of the tutorials that may come with FS2020. I'm not sure really what's going to be included, but if you're very serious about this hobby, and if you're actually considering maybe a career in aviation, or maybe you just want to learn a lot, you want to learn how to fly an airplane, it's going to take time, it's going to take some dedication, but I can tell you it's great fun, and it can take you to new levels. Really, it's just amazing. You just kind of have to keep encouraging yourself, go outside in the real world as well, maybe fly with an airplane, or fly as a passenger, or stop by an airport. It kind of recharges that aviation battery, because aviation in general is just amazing. It's lovely, and with this new simulator you can learn so much about aviation. I would definitely recommend it. And the last point that I want to mention, tying in with the previous point about learning, is the Flightsim community. There's a huge Flightsim community out there, for the different simulators, but there are also general communities out there that you can go to in order to learn a lot about how to use your Flightsim, how to configure it, how to install add-ons, what kind of scenery or airports or aircraft to add, how to fly on the VATSIM network. There's just so many things out there that you can learn from the Flightsim community. Just Google things that you walk into. You will automatically come across forums that contain a bunch of information. Probably the most well-known forum in this space is AVSIM. AVSIM has been around for many years. On those forums you can find different subsections for the different simulators, and you can ask questions and look up topics in order to find an answer to your question. So really do make use of that. Do make use of that information. do actually, read up on all the information on other websites. For example, also if you're going to fly on VATSIM, make sure you actually go to the VATSIM website and read up on the information there and join the forums so you can kind of see what's going on. Oftentimes you will also find many tips and guides for whatever on improving your sim or improving your life on VATSIM. So just be aware that the Flightsim community is huge, and of course a lot of new people are going to come in right now. So it's really good to be aware of this community. You're not alone in this hobby. And as a matter of fact, you can even probably make some friends, especially if you're going to fly multiplayer or maybe join VATSIM and maybe become an air traffic controller as well. It's just great fun. You're really going to meet a lot of people online and probably later in real life as well. One little side note that I do have to mention about the Flightsim community, with the different add-ons and the different simulators especially, there's always quite a bit of tension between certain groups. People who have opinions about simulators, which is better and why not, and then people going over each other. There's also what some people call a toxic side of the Flightsim community, unfortunately, so just be aware that it exists, but nothing to worry about. You can just ignore it. Just, try to do whatever feels right for you, what makes you happy, what makes your Flightsim happy. I was personally very happy with FS2004 back in the day. Really simple sim. I've used it for many years while other people were already on FSX, and I kept people asking me why I'm not switching, but I just felt happy using FS2004. It felt like a good sim for me. I had it configured properly. And you don't have to be afraid about people bashing you for using a certain sim or using a certain add-on, right? So just be aware that this side of the Flightsim community exists as well. But I would say the overall majority of people in there are very kind, are very willing to teach you more about all things flight simulation. So those were the main things that you have to keep in mind before the release of FS2020. Now, if you are an experienced Flightsim user, and if you have anything that new people should know, or some handy tips, make sure you leave them in the comments. Again, be part of the Flightsim community and actually help each other. Again, there's going to be a lot of new people coming in, and of course also a lot of young people who still want to learn a lot about flight simulation in general. So make sure you leave those comments below. And just to conclude this video, I'm very much looking forward to FS2020. It looks amazing from what we've seen in the video so far. It really gets me excited. It really gives me somehow a very classic aviation feeling, also allowing you to do simple bush flying and kind of the hardcore aviation things aside from just flying an airliner from A to B. It seems that we are able to do that very well with this new simulator, so I'm really looking forward to trying it out. I'll probably not switch to it as my main sim for airliner flying until some proper add-ons like PMDG are out and some of my favorite airports are out. Nonetheless, I'm going to really enjoy this sim flying, the basics of aviation basically. So I hope you're looking forward to it as much as I do. So thanks for watching this video here on the AviationPro channel. Now, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about flying on VATSIM, and as you know, FS2020 announced a partnership with VATSIM a couple of days ago, make sure to check out those videos right here in order to learn all about VATSIM. Some of these videos are a bit outdated, but I'm going to make an updated series in the autumn and winter season. But especially the full flight will kind of give you an idea of what it's like to fly an airliner from A to B using a simulator and using real-world ATC procedures and people who act as air traffic controllers. It's great fun. Definitely check it out. It really should get you excited for FS2020. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.